Okay, so we are finally live, guys. I think a very good morning to one and all. I'll be your host for today. My name is Praptej, and I'm currently working as a technical writer with the National Resource of Network Biology, that is NRNB, under Google Season of Docs 2020. So we'll be discussing a plethora of things in this webinar. The first one being Open Source 101. Then what is open source, the basics of open source, its nuances, where do you go right, where can you go wrong, and a few other things. Then we'll move on to nuances of Google Fusion of Docs, and then its timeline, how can you apply for it, what are the things that you may get into trouble with, and a few other things. So I'll start up right away with the workshop since we are already lost a bit of time. So I would like to ask you a question: that have you heard of the word open source technologies? And many of you had messaged me a couple of days back that we haven't heard about it. So let's begin with what is open source. Yes or no? Let's start it right now. Let's hear it. So open source software, basically it is that a computer software that is available in source code form. That is, let's say if you have heard about Google Chrome, you don't get to access the source code of Google Chrome or this Adobe application because they are copyrighted by the company under a software license that that might not permit you to study, change, or access any of the features through the source code, but you can use it by purchasing a license. But there are certain applications such as a free version of MATLAB known as Octave, Mozilla Firefox, that is kind of open source. Then TensorFlow for the Python people who are involved in Python, that is open source. So basically you can contribute to open source, you can contribute to the code base, you can change the codes, you can study the open source code, and you can improve it and distribute the software amongst yourselves. There are certain licenses, there are too many licenses like BSD2, BSD3, open source licenses and all. So the crux of open source is that software is available in source code form, and you can see the source code, as in you can change its source code, you can change the various aspects of it. And the best example of open source is your Linux operating system, that is Ubuntu, Kali Linux, or any other. So this question arises that does open source means free software? Actually, it doesn't mean free software. It means it's available for free usage, but it isn't free that you misuse it or something, but it is available for free. So open source is different from free software. All free software are not open source softwares, but open source softwares are free to use, modify, and redistribute. Now I've got a bit of idea of like what is open source software, how to use it. So now let's make it clear that open source is a philosophy that promotes free redistribution and access to an end product design and implementation details. The word free in OSS context means freedom and not the cost. That's the exact definition of whether it is free. The freedom is that you can change it with any aspect. You can change the source code, you can change the, like, let's say there's a website that promotes open source software, you can change its CSS code, you can change its HTML code, you can change anything if it's open source. But if it is not open source, you cannot even touch it because it's binded by certain rules and regulations of licenses. And if you do that, that would be illegal and can be termed as hacking. So the freedom to use, freedom to modify, and freedom to redistribute. So it's software freedom. It's not a free software. Now let's look at a very small history of open source. Not, to be honest, small. So concept of free sharing information existed long before computers, like sharing of cooking recipes or sharing of anything. Like you may share your experience of, like, playing cricket. You tell the other person how to play cricket. So that's open source in a kind. Open source software, but in a kind open source. In early 1960s, any computer academy who developed a software shared source code under the principle of openness and cooperation. Any source code, human readable form of software, was generally reviewed itself because users frequently modified the software to resolve compatibility or bugs issues with the hardware or the operating system. So this to a free software movement via the World Wide Web and termed as open source. Now there are certain principles which we need to follow. Open source principles. Open source enables us the code. As I told you, the source code is available. You may go through it, you may read it, you may change it according to your own understanding. Next point, we can see how it's made, the basics. Like telling you an example of a website, we can see how the website is made using its HTML, CSS, and JS code. The freedom to run the program for any purpose. Like I use Octave, so I can use Octave for a communication system program for like any electronical purpose. Another person may use it for running a deep learning program. So it depends on your purpose. You should not misuse it. That's the main issue. The freedom to study how the program works and adapt it to your needs. Next, the freedom to redistribute copies. You can distribute Octave as many times as you want. And finally, the freedom to improve the program. These are the few open source principles that you need to follow and you should follow, which are pretty much mandatory. Next, what are OSS technologies and why do we need OSS? Now we'll discuss that. Now, let's take an example of Ubuntu, that is a distro of Linux. Distro means a type of Linux. I myself am using Ubuntu for the past few months and I am loving it literally. I am able to change its source code according to my own sense, according to my own usage. Is and Android is an operating system that is derived from Linux. All the Android phones, namely Samsung, Huawei, Honor, what you are using so many Android phones these days. Its basic system is derived from Linux. What the companies did, they derived the basics from the Linux and then changed it according to their own needs, and hence took some licenses, some software copyrights, so that you may not change the Android system on your own basis. You cannot change that. So moving forward, there are other few like FreeBSD operating system derived from Unix, sorry. Then there is Linux, a family of Unix-like operating systems, Open Indiana Unix-like operating systems, and these are a few examples. These are not all the examples that I'm giving. Now, a few open source programming languages. One of my favorites is here Python and Ruby. These both are general purpose programming languages, as well as PHP used for scripting language suited for the web, and Perl, a general purpose programming language. These are examples of a few open source programming languages. Like for example, I have seen and contributed to the repository of Python on GitHub. So it's fun actually to see the languages that are open source, and you can contribute to them as well according to your own needs. Then a few examples of open source application software. Blender, I haven't used Blender on my own, so I can't give you much of an insight, but yes, I have used Eclipse. It is used basically for Java development, basically, but you can also develop, you can also program C++ in Eclipse as well, and many more things in Eclipse. It's a really good IDE. Moving on, I've already told you about Mozilla Firefox, a web browser that is also open source, and it comes pre-installed in any version of Ubuntu you'll install on your system. Then we have GIMP, and I'm repeating this word again and again, Octave. It is an open source form of MATLAB. Paid and not paid cost can be a big pain on a student's pocket. So there is Octave. I have myself contributed into Octave's development a few months ago, and it's fun to contribute into Octave. Moving on, a few more examples for application software. Mozilla Thunderbird, it is also present pre-installed onto your Ubuntu operating system. That is a distro of Linux. Then NASA Whirlwind, a virtual group geo browser. Then OpenOffice.org. It is basically an open source version of Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office, sorry, which you can buy, but it costs heavily on students' pocket. So the next best is open source, OpenOffice.org. Now, let's move on to open source softwares in enterprise applications. Now, these are a few companies like Ubuntu, WordPress. These are also open source. JBoss, you might have heard about these. Git, one of the best is present here. Git, Maven. These are the few applications that are open source and free to use. MySQL, MySQL. You might have used your semester 4 students use MySQL to study about structured query language, PHP, MediaWiki. So CentOS, another operating system. Ubuntu is here. WordPress. So these are a few examples. Now, let's see. Let's guess an operating system. So basically, Ubuntu, I have already told you, Ubuntu is an operating system. Linux is here. Apache is not an operating system as of now. These are also open source. WordPress, Joomla, Drupal. Now let's look at this. This is a 2011 smartphone operating systems open source market share. So the biggest share is backed by Android, which is based on Linux kernel, and the second biggest is iOS used by Apple in their mobile phones and as well as in their laptops. So it is basically based on Debian/FreeBSD kernel. Moving on, these are a few advantages of open source, that is security, quality, customizability, freedom, flexibility, interoperability, auditability, support options, cost, and try before you buy. So security is secure. So many people are involved into it, so they know the security nuances and the basic security leaks where security leaks can happen. So they contribute heavily to correct these security hazards in an operating system or open source software. I'm sorry. Then the quality is amazing. I'm using Ubuntu for the past few months, and it's really amazing. The quality can be compared to Mac OS, except a few things where it lacks, but it's just fine. It's good. Customizability, you have the power to customize it based on your own needs. Same, I'll give you the example of Ubuntu. You can customize it based on your understanding, how much you understand Linux and other distros. Next, the freedom to use it, the flexibility, these are self-explanatory. Then interoperability, self-explanatory term again. Auditability, support options, you get immense support from the mailing lists and the help and wiki pages of these open source softwares. There are plenty of pages on the internet where you can get help, such as for Ubuntu, I'm giving an example again. There is a wiki created by the Linux people who are working on Linux. Then the cost is, the operating systems mostly are free. The open source softwares are mostly free. And then obviously you get the option of try before you buy. Moving on. So PHP is fueling job growth. This is, I would like to skip. Next, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. I'll look at them in the end. Then let's move on to the main topic of this, that is this presentation, that is Google season of talks. So basically, I would like to tell you a small thing, that is there is a big difference between Google season of docs and Google summer of code. Now Google summer of code is a 3 months program. This is also 3 months program that happens in the, I think in the month of May, June, and June and July. I think these 3 months. And this program happens in the month of August, September, October, and November. So basically, this program brings together open source technical writer communities together to benefit of both. Together, we raise awareness of open source, of docs, and of technical writing. The best thing that I've seen in my life regarding this is GitHub. I was introduced to GitHub and open source exactly a year back in the month of October. I'd like to discuss this. Let's move on to the timeline a bit. What is the timeline of this program? This is basically, you can have a look at the program timeline at this website, developers.google.com/season of talks/timeline. So the program is announced March 23, 2020. This was the same date as last year. Then organization applications, like you people apply for technical positions. The organizations apply for mentoring positions, that they want to take in technical writers for mentoring. Now this is the deadline for organization applications, and there were at least around 100 organizations, 100 to 150 organizations that had applied this year, but only 50 got selected. So there is a big competition for the organizations as well, which is similar to the technical writers. And this year, around, if I'm not wrong, more than 2,000 technical writers had applied for technical writing positions, and around 103 or 104 got selected. So the official numbers will be announced by Google later this year, but I'm just giving you a bit of how tough the competition is over here. So the organizations are announced at around in May, and then so the one big difference in Google season of docs and Google summer of code is that you can Google summer of code is a program running for the past 15 years at least. So you can make a bit of guess which organization which will get selected and which won't be selected. But here you cannot even take a calculated risk. you have to wait till the organizations are around. And this is the phase where you can explore the technical writer exploration. You need to explore, you need to get in touch with the organizations, the mentors, and you have to talk to them that where should I apply to, how can I apply, and your proposal and all. Now this is the deadline for technical writer applications. Please make sure to apply well before the deadline, so that you don't miss the deadline. I have seen many persons missing the deadline and then cribbing about that. So please try to apply much before the deadline. Now Google announces your projects in around the mid of August, and then you start with, there is a phase known as community bonding, where you get to know about your mentors. I'm currently working with the NRN, that is National Resource for Network Biology. My mentors are from the academia; they are professors. They are working as the HOD of Electrical Technology in University of Colorado, US. So basically, you need to get to know them, get to know your mentors, speed up with the open source organization, and refine their projects in collaboration with the mentors. Sometimes after you get selected, you get to know that I am weaker in, let's say, Git and GitHub. I don't have information about GitHub pages. My English is not up to the date. So these are the things you need to take care of, and make sure your basics are right. Now mid of September, doc development officially begins. Right now we are in this year we are in the development phase till 30th of November, and then we have to present our finalization proposed project works, and then results will be announced in the month of Jan for standard length. Okay, there are two types of projects in this. Like in Google's Summer of Code, there is only one type of project, like 3 months coding and straight programming. But here there's a bit of difference. Like there are two types of projects. One is a standard length project, and the other one is a long running project. So the long running project extends to 5 months. It is about 5 months, and the other one being for 3 months. So it depends on how much you want to write, the length of your documentation. Currently, if you want to follow my work, it is over here. Yep, on this website I'm working on a software known as synbiohub. It is basically a design repository for it is basically like GitHub is for code. So synbiohub is for genetic biological designs. It is a repository for genetic biological designs. Basically this is a stream of bioinformatics. So I need to take care of that. Basically, I'm writing this documentation down. I've been working on it for the past, say, around 1.5 months, and this is what I've done so far. So you may follow my work over there. Now, basically, there are a few guides where you can, learn about technical writer guide. That how can you eligibility, what is your eligibility to participate in season of talks. Like you must be 18, able to demonstrate prior. Yeah, this is a very important point. Able to demonstrate prior technical writing experience by submitting role descriptions and work samples. Now, months before participating in this competition, I'd started with open source. So I came to know about one of my deficiencies, that I was not too apt in programming at that time. So I started by contributing to documentations. I started writing documentations for organizations. I have written documentations for TensorFlow, for Octave, as well as for robotic simulator known as PBOTs. So there is a column in the application form that you fill. That is, there are 3 columns. You need to give at most 3 prior technical writing experiences wherever you have worked, whatever technical writing experience you have. This is mandatory. If you can't show this, then there will be a bit of difficulty for you to get selected. Then eligible to work in their country of residence, that's okay. And a country not embargoed by the United States. So India is not embargoed by the United States. Now, open source mentors, season of talks mentors are not necessarily technical writers. Now, as I've told you, my mentors are professors. They are from academia and teaching in University of Colorado, US, and they may have little experience in technical writing, technical communication. They are the members of open source organizations who know the value of good documentation and who are experienced in open source processes and tools. The relationship between you and your mentors is collaboration. You bring good documentation experience and skills to the open source organizations, and your mentors contribute to their knowledge of open source and the code of the software. Now, my mentors, we have a weekly meeting wherein my mentors teach me about this open source software named SynBioHub. So they have taught me a lot about this software. This software is present on this website, and they have taught me a lot. So, Biohub is a design repository for people designing biological constructs. It enables DNA and protein designs to be uploaded and provides a shareable link to allow others to view them. This also facilitates searching for information about existing useful parts and designs by combining data from a variety of sources. This is very helpful. Actually, a few years back, this did not exist, and it was very difficult for a person sitting in Tokyo to share his or her genetic biological designs with a person sitting in, let's say, UK. So it would have been very, very difficult. And now there is this software known as SynBioHub, which is facilitating so easily. So it's better to contribute to something which is of use. And since the code base of this is written in much in Python and JavaScript, so it was a bit easier for me as well to contribute. So this is basically a technical writer application phase, runs from this to this date. This dates, basically these dates will fluctuate every year. During this period, you can apply to take part in season of talks. The Google program administrators forward the relevant details from your application to your chosen open source organization. Then the open source mentors select projects they want to mentor. So basically, there is a bit of they have given creating a technical writer application. So this is basically a guide which you can go through. I would like to share my proposal with you all. I hope I have it right now. Yep. So this is my proposal, and I made an 11-page proposal for this. It was of 11 pages, if I'm not wrong. So I can share this proposal with you. If you want to have, just ping me on my email. I'll request Kushdeep to put up my email in the chat box as well. So I have this project proposal. I've clearly stated my purpose of this project. Then a bit of abstract. What is the current state of this documentation? So basically, in my place, the API documentation does exist to some extent, but it was pretty haphazard. So I had to clean up the API documentation and write the GUI documentation, that is the graphical user interface documentation, from scratch, which did not exist at that time. But now it does exist to an extent, and it exists over here, and I have made it using GitHub pages. So what is the proposed user documentation? Basically, these are a few that I've proposed. I had discussions with my mentors prior to getting selected. So this is very important. You need to have discussions over the email or whichever platform the mentors they want. So just have a bit of discussion with them. I had divided this into 6 parts. Bit of analysis. I had used Slate. It is also an open source software which helps you create beautiful, intelligent, and responsive API documentation, and it is a Ruby based tool. So I had given a bit of this. Then the verdict, structure of the proposed documentation, project goals. This is very important, guys. Timeline is really very important for you to make sure that it is there, and if it is not, it can be a bit of trouble, because the mentors want to have a week by week of what you will do, a week by week channelization of what you will do. So this basically is how I wrote the project proposal. And my previous documentorial contributions, that is, this one was to Octave. Then I had contributed this much to Octave. This is a small bit. Then VBots, and had already also contributed to WordPress, to their documentation team. And why this project? Why am I right person? Personal info, and then references. So this is a small example of how you can create a proposal. Then the application form will consist of this: the personal information, a display name of your choice. This is a good thing to we recommend you not use your real name or your full name for your display name. This is good. Then information about your technical writing experience, recent technical writing experience, a link to your CV, Try to make your CV good and solid, a link to your work samples, and anything else you'd like to add. Project proposal is mandatory. Try to get in touch with your mentors prior to this and finalize your project proposal. Then your open source project name, the name of your proposed technical writing project, a detailed description. And the other important fields are like choosing a standard length and accepting a stipend. This is also good, but I would like to just make this point that don't run behind this stipend or this internship. If you will try to contribute to open source, you will be able to get in touch with good mentors who will guide you towards these competitions and all. First, make sure you contribute to open source and try. If you can't, that's fine. But if you should try. That's what my point is. Trying is important. This is basically a checklist. Then on your acceptance and all, this is community bonding, as I told you, receiving stipends. Now, according to each country, there is different stipend ranging from $2,400 to $6,000. For India, I think it's 3,000 something. Using due to purchasing power parity (PPP) based calculation to determine the stipend. Then you have tax forms, your responsibilities and all. Then this is for mentors and administrators. Now, for this year, I think these were the organizations selected, and so yeah, many I can say that many have chosen the standard length, and there were less people who chose this, the long running projects, since most of the documentations can be written in 3 months. And just like to show you my project proposal as well over here. Yeah, this is my project description. So basically, this was what they put on Google Season of Docs. This was my 11-page proposal, which they have put over here. And this is it. Basically, they cut it out. I don't know why. So this is my proposal. Finally, there are some rules which you need to, adhere to. These are the acceptance rate, writing period. You need to go through these. Now let's come on to the most important part: what timeline you should follow, not what Google has given, what you should follow. A couple of months at least before Google Season of Docs, start to contribute to open source in some way or the other. It may be through documentations, it may be through the programming part. There are two ways to start get into open source. The number one being to contribute through documentations. The second one being contributing through programming. I chose the first one since I was not very sure about my programming skills. So yeah, that was it. And start to document whatever contributions you have done. Like I tried to make a note of every contribution that I did in a Google Doc, so that I can later copy paste it to this application form. Secondly, try to get in touch with your mentors. Try to understand their mentality of what proposal they want from your side, and whatever do they want from your side. So these are for the previous seasons. This is just the second season of Google Season of Docs. Last year was the first season, and I guess around 50 projects were selected, and just one person was selected last year. And this year, 53 projects something, and 104 or 5 technical writers, like 2 to 3 max at per person. So try to get in touch with your mentors, and just don't focus on getting into competitions. Don't try to like, if a person competing with you, there's no competition in open source. First of all, a person competing with you is making 4 pull requests, so you want to make 8 pull requests. There's no sense to it. Say that person makes 4 pull requests and none of them get merged and all 4 get closed, but you make 1 pull request and that gets merged. So obviously, which one is more impact making? The person who has made just 1 pull request and his pull request gets merged. So that's what is mandatory. You should make good pull requests and try to get your pull request merged. And it is always a waiting game. Never try to go on commenting on things. These mentors are busy. You can't expect them to give reply in 2 hours or 3 hours. They might give a reply in 24 hours, in 48 hours, in 72 hours. It just depends on them. So that's it from my side, and I would like to take your questions now. Okay, there is a person, magician gamer. He's asking, do you have to practice about how the project works, then practice, run it, and then write it? Magician Gamer, it is preferred that you do that way. Since first of all, I had to load my project onto my personal computer, then I had to run it, and then I had to, see the nuances regarding to it. So yes, it is mandatory. Like there are so many organizations, say NumPy. This year NumPy participated in Google season of docs. It is a Python library. So, and say WordPress, so you need to get in touch with the application you want to write the documentation for, and writing documentation is a pretty tough part as well. You need to have all the knowledge regarding an application. So that's it from my side. Any other questions? I'll wait for a couple of more minutes and then I'll stop the stream then. Simarpreet, you're asking what about the new projects which don't have any docs yet? How would one start with that? Okay, so let's say that project is complete. The project should be complete. You should. Okay, so basically, how would one start with that? Um let's say that project is complete, and so you should pull that onto your system. You should make a fork of that, try to run it, and then basically you can divide documentation broadly into two types, that is the API one and the GUI one. There is always two ways to use a software: using the API key and then API keys, and the other one being the GUI, using the user interface. So, like, let's say you have knowledge about plugins and all, then you can obviously start with the API documentation, which is easier. And the GUI documentation requires a lot of explanations and all. So you need to be perfect with the software. So that's about it. How you should start with new projects which don't have any docs yet. Like I learned about plugins in this like I learned about plugins a lot in this project. And plugins is a really interesting concept which you should all learn. Okay, so Simranpreet, your question is, do you have knowledge about the project in which you are contributing? Yeah, I have knowledge about the project to which I am contributing. Actually, it is basically about, like I had explained, like GitHub is for code, and this Syn Biohub is for genetic biological designs. Earlier genetic biological designs, they did not have any way to be shared amongst the professors on the doctors which used to study about them. And what I feel that in this era of COVID and the where the healthcare system is needs a massive improvement, this can be a big change, since it can facilitate the exchange of genetic biological designs amongst the other people. And I mean, in which language it is written? It is written in Python, my friend. Python and JavaScript. A weird question: if an organization is not participating in GSoD, or maybe not having a knowledge about this program, so you can get into Pulkit, you can get into touch with their mentors. The like I had like I have told you, I had contributed to Octave to their documentations. They did not have any knowledge about Google season of docs, so I had to explicitly tell the mentors that there is this competition, Google season of docs. So then they had applied for it, but they unfortunately they got rejected. So I don't know what, that's it. And do you need to have experience in that language? So it is not pretty mandatory similar that you have experience in that language in which it is written, but it is good to have experience in that language as well, since you need to look at the APIs, and the APIs are obviously written in that language. Like this for this application, let me show you the API documentation as well a bit. Okay, so this is the API documentation for this, and this basically includes two projects: an open source software project providing web interface for the storing and publishing of synthetic biological designs, and a public instance of the aforementioned software project at synbiohub.org, allowing users to upload and share designs. Basically, this can be accessed using the APIs, the first one, and the second one can be accessed using the GUI. So basically, what SynBioHub can be used for? SynBioHub can be used to publish a library of synthetic parts and designs as a service, to share designs with collaborators, and to store designs of biological systems locally. Data in SynBioHub can be accessed via HTTP API, Java API, or Python API, where it can be integrated into CAD tools for building genetic designs. SynBioHub contains an interface to upload new biological data to the database, to generate DNA parts, to perform queries, to access desired parts, and to download SBall, GenBank, and FASTA. These terms are a bit complicated, so I won't be going into them. And these are the contributors who have contributed to the building of this project. And he is my mentor, Professor Chris Myers. He is currently at University of Colorado, but this is a bit older version. So at that time he was deputy head of department electrical technology and bioinformatics at University of Utah. There are a few ways to install this. Like I've told you, you need to install it. So like it can be installed using Docker. And like I am working with this project on Ubuntu, so it is pretty easy to install this. And then the usual things, like there's also an interesting concept using SendGrid mail setup. And these are the endpoints, that is the API documentation endpoints. And I am writing this documentation like over here. So this is the GUI one. And like I have told you, I've studied a lot about plugins. So plugins are modular standalone additions to SynBioHub. They function in a way similar to browser extensions. They can be installed separately from the browser SynBioHub and provide additional custom functionality to the browser oblique SynBioHub experience, despite having completely separate code base from browser SynBioHub, though they seem integrated to the user. There are several types of plugins which can be used. A bit of overview has been given in this documentation already, and you can use it through API, as I've told you, or the GUI using Postman is also a GUI interface. So these are certain terms which can sound complex, but they aren't if you get to know about them. So okay, do you get suggestions or tutorial for how it works? Yeah, Simarpreet, for my software, this basically, it is not that familiar to all, because this is limited to the domain of bioinformatics, and not many from India go into this domain of bioinformatics. So there are a few tutorials on the internet, on YouTube, sorry, for this. And the tutorials are enough to get you started a bit. And if you get started, then you will get to know more about it automatically if you just go on and on. Like when we get to know about a programming language, we just get to know the basics, and then we have to read through its documentations. Like I'm into Python, so I had to take a few courses to get started. And then I read through the Python documentations, and it helped me a lot. So this is it. Any more questions? I'll wait for a couple of more minutes to take questions then. You're welcome, Simarpreet. So guys, before I close on this stream, I would like to tell you about my event on the 18th of October with regards to Master the Mainframe. It is a competition organized by IBM every year, and on mainframes. Mainframes is a really very important and a really interesting technology, which is still in use by the Fortune 500 companies, and there are immense employment opportunities. So do join in for that event, and we'll be having a lot of fun. And I would like to introduce mainframes in that event as well. And it is a three-leveled competition wherein you can network with a lot of IBM people who are the university mentors, and directly you may get invitations for internships over there. And I'd like to I'll try to invite IBM India chairperson for university affairs, and wherein you can interact with her and get to know more about the work culture and how to get involved in this. So, guys, thank you for having me over here. It was a pleasure to present and put forward my doubts regarding my points regarding Google Season of Talks. And I hope it was of some use. You may get in touch with me, and I'll all. I think you all have my LinkedIn profile as well as my email ID. And if you have any doubts, you may get in touch with me. Thank you.
Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible? Hello? Hello everyone, this is Ashita Bajaj. With this, we have come to an end of our event. Hello everyone, this is Ashita Bajaj. With this, we have come to an end of our event. With this, we have come to an end of our event. So in our event, many new students showed up, and they were introduced to open source, and the enthusiasm of students were on another level. All participants would receive an email from DigitalOcean by the end of October regarding your swags. Uh, We have free GitHub student pack. We are glad to inform all the recipients that we are providing you all with the GitHub student pack that you all can claim free of cost right now by just submitting an application. To claim this offer, you just have to simply tap the below link and follow the on-screen instructions. Okay, and you can connect with us on our social platforms like on Instagram, YouTube, website, Twitter. The links are given here. And if by any chance anyone missed out on our streams from the 3 days of the event, feel free to visit our YouTube channels and find all the sessions in the Hacktober Fest playlist. We hope to see you all again next year with new repositories, new issues, and new themes. Meanwhile, you can share your blogs or your projects by visiting our website at dsc.gtbit.org. In the end, I would like to say that please keep an eye out on your mailbox to find a mail from us regarding some very useful information and about GitHub Education AutoCAD Challenge. Thank you.